You hear a lot of people saying things in these post-election days like our country has never been so divided, but you can see that that's not really true if you put your mind's eye back to 1870.
All right, so the Civil War had just ended, but the bitterness and anger lingered. Then came a development that many white Americans back then regarded as dreadful. The 15th Amendment had passed. Black men had the right to vote.
Now, here's something that we can all take pride in today. Did you know one of the first places in the country where those new voters made a big difference was right here on Delmarva? Jim Duffy of Secrets of the Eastern Shore fame joins us with a story of the ingenious ballot box triumph. How are you, Jim? It's good to see you.
Good. Good afternoon.
You came in today. So,
thanks for having me.
It's kind of hard to imagine these days, but there was a whole lot of opposition to black men voting.
It really is sad to think about when you go back. So you need like 3/4 of the states to pass an amendment,
Right.
and that was a very slow process. The southern states, they were kind of forced to do it as a condition of the end of the war. But he eventually got passed with 3/4 of the states, but I'm embarrassed to say that here on Delmarva we didn't have such a good record. Delaware voted against the 15th Amendment.
Okay.
Maryland didn't just vote against the 15th Amendment, but its legislature voted against it unanimously.
Wow.
They eventually made up 1902 or 1903. Delaware passed it 30 years too late. Maryland was 100 years too late. They passed it in the 1970s.
Really?
Very sad to think about, isn't it?
Oh my goodness. So how did things go after the amendment was passed?
Nothing really happened. So there were all these little civic elections for like mayors and city councils going on. The first one after the amendment passed was in Salisbury. No black men voted. The second one was in St. Michael's. No black men voted. The third one was in Easton. No black men voted. But then came Chestertown. They passed a law that said only property owners were allowed to vote. Now, kind of a newsflash at that time, not many black people owned property. But it wasn't zero. There were a few who did. So there was a guy named William Perkins. He owned a very famous oyster saloon called the Rising Sun. There was a guy named James Jones who ran a grocery store. There's another guy named Isaac Anderson. I don't know what he did to make his money, but these 3 property owners were eligible to vote, and they could have just kind of let things ride and not put their reputations and their money at risk.
Yeah.
But instead, they got the entire community behind this. So the first thing they did, they had a big rally at Jane's United Methodist Church, which is still standing today in a very historic place. And they packed the church with 500 people and praying and singing and speechifying. And then they had this gigantic fun parade. It was a noontime parade. People started lining up at dawn. The queen of the parade was dressed like the goddess of liberty, and children were waving flags of every state in the country, and they went out and kind of built up all of this excitement, which raises the question of what difference did that make if only property owners could vote, right?
Right, yeah.
But they had one more trick up their sleeve. That guy I mentioned, Isaac Anderson, sold a tiny and worthless piece of land on the banks of the Chester River. It was like 3 feet by 1 feet. And he files a deed with the county, and he sells it to a group of 44 black men for $15. I think they each paid like 25 cents each.
Oh my goodness.
And the best thing is, the Republican Party of Lincoln, in favor of the 15th Amendment side, won all 7 races in that election. And the average margin of victory was 22 votes. So this trick made all the difference. And we're just like 8 weeks after the amendment passed, and this got attention all over the country. Yeah. The white folks who were opposed to the 15th Amendment were outraged, and they said, this is the worst bit of fraud anybody's ever seen. We have to investigate this. We have to prosecute these people. But they had one problem. They had pulled the same trick. Right after they passed the law, some white guys sold a worthless piece of land to some other white guys who didn't own property so that they could vote. So all these guys did was take the trick that they'd already pulled and turned it upside down, right on them.
Jim
So-
Duffy, Secrets of
wow.
the Eastern Shore.
How about that?
Another great story. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Wonderful talking to you.